Hi, this is Talk K-Dramas with Bruce and Dallas.
Hey.
Pachinko, episode 7.
Mm-hmm.
We're almost done.
We are almost done.
Okay, you have 3 sentences?
This episode. Anyway, all right. So, sentence number 1, we see a young Hansu. And he is a math tutor for an United States family. Sentence number 2, Hansu's father steals from the Yakuza and desperately tries to handle the situation. And sentence number 3, the great earthquake of 1923 hits and ends Hansu's ability to go to the United States and facilitates him joining the Yakuza.
You know, I'm reading the book.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost done. If I would have read last week one more chapter, you wouldn't have had to make fun of me about not knowing what a Yakuza is.
Oh,
I know. And in the book, they really...
I'm sorry for making fun of you for not knowing what the Yakuza was.
I know. I don't know why you think I would know. Anyways.
we watch enough like action movies, I think, for kind of, well, you don't pick, yeah. So I'm genuinely interested in like bad guys, like just like the development of bad guys. And so when I see movies, I'm like, oh, the Triad, Chinese, the Yakuza, Japan.
Okay,
the mafia, Italian, right? The Russian mafia. The Haitians, the Jamaican, it's like it's to me that is an absolutely fascinating draw to me.
Well, in the book, so they really emphasized that like pachinko parlors and things like that they are run by Yakuzas.
Yeah.
So you got it, a touch of it in the movie, mm-hmm. when Hannah tells her mother, you're like that Yakuza, but in the book, I mean, it's pretty clear that if you're like pachinko,
if you're running a pachinko parlor, you are a gangster. Yeah, they make it way more clear in the book.
Well, so interesting because I know, right? I have some of my family.
I don't know if I know what you know. Go ahead.
Okay, so one of my cousins, he's married to a woman who's half Japanese, and she was telling me her sister got a tattoo, and she's like, "Oh, my mother was so mad." Her mother's Japanese.
Yeah.
Because she
only
can't.
The Yakuza do that.
Because she's like, she can't take her home now. She can never take her to Japan, mm-hmm. to meet the family because they've been living here now, mm-hmm. in the U.S. because she has a tattoo, and only gangsters have tattoos. So so when I was reading about it, it was just interesting. And then I was remembering, because she told me that story, mm-hmm. we were at Legoland one time with the kids. You know what I was saying?
Your stuff always translates into like some, oh man.
What?
It's okay. Go ahead. Finish the story.
So we were at Legoland. Legoland has a water park here in California. So me and the kids are in the water park, and mm-hmm. they were young. They were little. Yeah. And so I see this older I shouldn't say Japanese, Asian man.
Okay.
He was quite old, older, 60s. Mm-hmm. And he had a whole bunch of tattoos. Yeah. And I was thinking, oh, he must be a gangster. I know. So I'm like, kids, let's go to the other side of the pool. Wow.
Wow.
And then I was thinking, because lots of people get tattoos now. It's a mm-hmm. it's a thing. But
body art is what we call it now.
This was an older guy.
Yeah, for sure. No, you're for real, love. You're keying in on something that is legitimate. It's a legitimate social observation.
So now I'm wondering, do people think that about my dad?
He has a Sagittarius.
No, every time I see him, he has a new tattoo. Like, have you seen him? He has tattoos all over his arms now.
Yeah, they might.
But again,
if they read them, they're gonna know that like half of them are like
religious.
Christian based. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
But I think when you see an older man, right? Because there are a lot of there are older people that are getting tattoos.
For sure.
But my dad's 70. So
it's about to turn 70.
Yeah. So I'm thinking when I see an older gentleman, Asian man with tattoos.
Oh, yeah.
He might be
look, an older guy,
Yakuza.
an older guy in general with tattoos is more than likely to be affiliated and stuff like that.
But
for sure.
But my grad grew up seeing older men with tattoos because my grandfather had tattoos, but his were like military tattoos, like a woman in a little bikini. Yeah. He had them all over his arms, but there's
definitely a set of tattoos that the gangsters normally get, and it's pretty clear. Just like it's like prison tats too, right? It's like there's certain things that you're expecting, and well, for prison tats is also a different quality because they're not running around with needles and stuff like that in prisons, but they're using shards of glass and everything, and so the details are not as fine, so you can tell if you pay attention to such things.
Episode 7, somebody told me if they're black and white, they're prison tats.
I don't know. Yes and no, both of this. It depends on the person.
So episode 7, this was this whole episode was about Hansu.
I loved it.
I know, but I do like him when he has his hair all slicked back and he's dressed all nice.
You like the gangster. You like the gangster in him.
I do. I kind of do. Okay. This is so interesting. 1923. Yokohama.
So
historically,
we need to pause for a second. So not pause, but like, when did he meet Sunha? Or
I'll tell you right now.
Oh, because you looked.
No, I didn't look it up. I have all my notes here.
Oh, yeah. When did he meet Sunja?
Very interesting. Well, it must have been a little bit after, because 1915 is when episode 1 takes place, but that's Sunja's not even born yet.
Yeah.
And then let's see. Well,
if it's 1915 and we assume that 20 years have passed, at least or so, then we're good.
Well, it was 1931 when in episode 4, when Hansu was at the tailor, when Sunja was going to get married.
Okay.
So he met her.
I'm fine.
Just a few years later, not very long, just a few years.
Not very long.
He moved up quick.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, they had that all set up for that. It was just just tickling.
7 years. About 7 years. About 7 years.
7. That's 8. Yeah, that's the 8. And so he met her in about 7 years after that moment. Yeah. Okay.
So he moved up within that time. Okay. So you already did your 3 sentences. So we see Hansu, a young Hansu, not very young, but
youngish,
1923, with his father. So we see this whole episode is the relationship with him and his father. They were very close, and it was cool because he did talk about his father, and when he was talking to Sunja, talk about washing his clothes, and so his father,
the suit that he inadvertently burned because he put it too close to the fire.
So Hansu's father works for, I guess he is a Yakuza.
He was basically the accountant for the Yakuza.
And the Yakuza offered young Hansu a job because he was really good in math with the abacus. But the father says no, like he does not want Hansu. It's clear he does not want Hansu to work for this guy. And Hansu already is a tutor for an American family.
Yes.
And doing pretty well, I assume. Right?
I mean, as well as you can. Yeah, for sure.
And I think the father doesn't want him in the business. And the Yakuza, who's Japanese, tells Hansu, you'll have to work harder if you want to be one of us. I was thinking
Korean. Well, he said what I recall, because that kind of hit me was that he said, "Oh, your Japanese has gotten better, but you're going to have to work harder in order to be one of us." Yeah. And so that, because it was like, it was a compliment and yet a jab. Like, it was to definitely establish, like, dude, you're still Korean, and we'll talk about it later on when it comes up. But
Man,
yeah, it's really like they're really trying to set the table on the relationship. Like, they keep setting the table. But I think that in the United States, we tend it's being a little bit too subtle sometimes when they're like really like disrespecting Koreans or whatever. It's like it seems too subtle. But by the end of this episode, it's not going to be subtle anymore.
The prejudice against the Koreans in the book is so, you see it so much more. And
yeah, they made it like I said, there's some decisions that they made with making the film where I'm like, okay, this is
so the book's like, a little different then. The book, they
really like softened up a lot of the edges on the Japanese in this space. I honestly, as a race and ethnicity guy, I actually understand why you might want to do something like that in the United States. When it's a United States film, you're not trying to like, create Asian hate, and use a film like this to justify treating the Japanese worse or whatever. It's a story that needs to be told. It's a story that needs to be told. Yeah.
I just kept thinking, man, the prejudice in like everywhere.
Yeah,
we have it was like the same thing for us here with South America, well, not like Mexico, in South America, how our prejudice is, it's everywhere.
Well, you're not announcing it, you just like what prejudice? Mexico and South
against other
Mexicans
people.
in South America and other South American folks,
and it was so interesting. It's like they're like neighbors, and you don't like them, you hate them, you treat them bad, you call them names. And there's really no reason. It's just to make us look better, whenever you have a prejudice or you talk down to somebody, it's always because of your insecurities,
that's definitely part of it.
And
on a psychological level, that's part of it.
Yeah, some of that.
But at a social level, it's always about power. That is
power, right? To make you feel better, to have power over them. And it was just weird to see that, because we've never grown up to know the prejudice of the Koreans and the Japanese, but we have it here. Well, you may know, but
I knew more than a little bit about it.
But I mean, what I'm trying to say is, it's like we didn't learn it.
Yeah, that's not a story that gets told here in the United States.
But yet we have our own story.
Oh, we sure do. Yeah,
we sure do. So
that Mexican versus it's not versus, but it's like the prejudices between like the Mexico and all the other Spanish speaking countries in our part of the hemisphere and everything. That is a real thing. I did not find that. So that's a story that I didn't know a whole bunch about until I was at Southwestern College down in Chula Vista. It's interesting. I know it's interesting, but here in Oceanside, the vast majority of people are Mexicans, and so then I never even thought that there was different groups and anything. It's like you have to have substantial numbers in order to even pick up on any of that vibe. And so in Chula Vista, most people were Mexican, but there was a significant number of other Central and South American folks there. And so therefore, when I said, hey, assume that someone was Mexican, it became like disrespectful. It's like, I'm from Salvador or El Salvador. So, and I'm like, whoa. I didn't mean to trip any wires, but at the same time, my ignorance is no reason to disrespect
it's weird.
Someone.
You would have thought you would have understood that, because you being Asian, like if somebody said, are you Chinese? Like, no, I'm Japanese.
Well, ain't nobody ever rolled up on me thinking that I was Asian.
Yeah.
So if I were Japanese and looked Japanese, then yes, for sure that would happen, because that has happened throughout. That's been throughout United States history.
People didn't question like obviously you're multiracial. People never questioned you. What?
Well, you say that, but most people don't identify
Mm.
me as multiracial at all.
Mm.
Most people, when they look at me and they interact with me, they assume that I'm Black.
So weird, because when I first met you, I think I even asked you, and you were a little bit upset that I asked you. I remember you're like, at the
Yeah,
time, but that was another time and place. I understand you were going
I was
through your
definitely going through my pro-Black
identity
phase, which
crisis.
I'm not any less pro-Black, but I'm definitely more accepting of being
Yeah,
just all of who I
yeah,
am.
yeah.
Yeah.
So so that whole thing was interesting. I just, like I said, it kind of made me think like, oh my gosh, and then you have, what's going on in Russia,
Oh
and just the
yeah.
prejudice
Yeah.
against people that live so close to each other. And again, it is just power.
Yeah.
Everybody's so afraid to lose any power over, and anyways, we can go on and on. And I know
Yeah.
we need to move on, but
And so, yeah, and that honestly, that's where I wrote my dissertation at
mm,
this space of
yeah.
talking about like what this is. And I would argue that the way that this prejudice manifested itself, because when you get down to, there is prejudice, right? And that's normally on a cultural, ethnic level, but then there's racism. And that's when you make the differences between the two groups, biological. And this is completely make believe, right? Like it's literally socially constructed. There's no biological distinction between human beings, if you would. Um, there's biological differences between individual people, but we're all human beings and we understand that, right? So let's take that off the table. I don't need to teach that class, but when you see the interactions between the Japanese and the Koreans, they think of themselves as biologically distinct groups, biologically, not just culturally distinct groups, but biologically distinct groups, inferior in every way that is meant to be. Therefore, that is to me the beginning of talking about racism. But most people would definitely see this as prejudice and ethnocentrism, if you would. But I'm like, there is a narrative in here that is biological in nature, and that is normally where we start talking about racism.
So you had mentioned that, so the father gets himself in trouble because he steals money
for a woman,
and he said, I didn't steal it, like he was just going to borrow it. But it's so funny because he tells Hansu, you've never been with a woman, one day you'll fall in love and you'll lose yourself to her.
Prophetic.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, you love that he would risk his life for a woman.
I love that I can give you some puppy dog eyes and you're like, okay. I know that's so bad. Some women would probably hate that, right? Some women would probably hate that.
Hate what?
Just that idea of that you could do that you would do that to a man or something, or that a woman would do that. I don't know. I love it that you, yeah. I could be like, Bruce, and you're like, okay. I love that power I have over you. I love it, but I don't abuse it.
You try not to.
I try not to.
Yes.
But you know what?
You definitely have power over me.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but I love that. And I test it. Sometimes I test it though.
I clearly know when you're testing me too. Like
when you're watching, a football game or something, I'll come in and I'll just be like, just stand there. And Bruce will turn off the TV and he looks at me. What? And I'm like, oh, nothing. Never mind, go back. Go back and watch TV. Okay, we're good. He still loves me.
Wow.
I'm just kidding. I mean, no, actually, I'm not kidding. But...
no, she's not. No, she is not. Not in the least bit.
Okay. So the whole thing, not the whole episode, but the relationship with the father and how Hansu becomes who he is.
Yes.
Because the father is telling him, hey, you must kill me in your heart.
In order to be able to leave. Yeah.
Yeah, because the father wants a better life for Hansu. He wants him to go to America with the family, and do good. And it's so sad because Hansu's like, no, I want to be with you.
Right.
Yeah.
And
that dilemma of the father, putting Hansu first. I mean, to the point where he had to even hit him.
Yeah.
Like, get out of here, leave me alone.
Yep.
I can't imagine.
But Hansu, he's still stuck. That's why we love Hansu. He is passionate, and loyal to a fault. And to me, that like this space is definitely like, and your heart was broken to see his father treat him that way when all Hansu wanted to do was just be with his dad. And he was like, his dad was like, you don't want to be like me. You don't want to be around me because bad things are about to happen to me and you need to go and make a better life for yourself. He knew, right? Of course he knew. I mean, it was only a matter of time, really, because and that Yakuza boss was like, I told you that woman was no good for you. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, he straight up, he was like, I know this is gonna go bad for you, bro. And you're gonna do something stupid. You're gonna do something dumb.
And then when he goes back to the woman to get the money, she's like, yeah, she gave it to somebody else.
Yeah, she gave it to another dude. Man. Yeah. And it's like, and so, he's really getting whipped around. You're right. And so, but all of that is just like, to me, like I'm just loving it because this is definitely, I'm gonna say it like this is definitely an American movie in regards to like you're fleshing out the bad guy, if you would. Like Hansu before this episode was relatively unsympathetic. The reason why we liked him so much is because it was Min Ho, right? Just done. Now, after you get this incredible backstory, right, and know that he was doing other things, he really was doing other things. He really was going to go to the United States and be a different person. He really was about that. And yet,
that's how the chips fall, they say.
That's, and yet this is how he got involved with a criminal organization, and that's what happened. That's just what happened.
Yeah, it just happened. So I kind of wanted to talk a little bit. So on Hansu's way to go to America, there's a huge earthquake, historical earthquake. Can I read about it?
We're going to just skip all the way through the family.
There was more stuff to talk about.
Well, I mean, this is because that's the end.
Yeah, but what else did you want to talk about?
Well, the only thing that I wanted to say is that, because I think everyone missed it, is that he wasn't just a math dude. He was a mathematician, Hansu. Meaning, like the book that they said, oh, do you understand this stuff? That was a book that I think it was something like Modern Math or something like that, which is the mathematical theory book, if I recall correctly. So it wasn't
just a math.
Yeah, it wasn't algebra, and it wasn't the abacus. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't. So hopefully that makes sense, right? What I'm trying to say. Smart. He was a math. He was way. If you want to,
well, he was a math tutor.
If you really want to get into, right, it's like if you're assuming that someone good at math is smart, which I don't necessarily do, but he was a high level math
he
guy.
Understood.
Yeah. He wasn't just, like I said, good at algebra or something like that.
Do you understand this? And he's like,
yeah. And so,
okay.
And and they unquestionably,
of course, would be.
We're going to take him to Yale, and they knew, it's like it's.
But he wasn't.
It was so simple.
But he wasn't going to Yale.
Yeah, he was just going to support, and
who knows? Maybe he would have.
And the father, I love the way the father said, it's like, you're gonna have to bear the inadequacies of their son, but you'll be able to make a better life for yourself. And I'm like, man, that was taking some real swings at whiteness right there. Like I said, not white people, whiteness, like, because it's like the table's already setting itself up, and because we've already seen that, basically the inadequacies of white people in this space, and with what's his name, the banker boss. The boss, of Solomon, right? And so it's like, so you're already seeing like this, these are the consequences, this is the table that's being set. And so for them to put that in an intergenerational space, that's talking about whiteness, right? Like I said, not white people necessarily, it's the construct of whiteness. But anyway,
is there anything else you want to talk about?
that's it.
So
I wanted to make sure that we knew that Hansu was really smart, and that's why
we knew.
I still
I knew.
Anyway,
you didn't have to tell me.
Okay,
He just looked smart.
Wow. I don't know what that means. And I'm just going to leave that there.
So this is just so good. This is from the Smithsonian magazine.
Mm-hmm.
It talks about, I mean, I can just go on about this earthquake, right? So just stop me if I said too much. There's just a lot here. It's just really interesting.
Yeah.
So remember.
Too much. I'm just kidding.
They're in Yokohama.
Yes.
Yokohama, did I say that right? Okay. So the first shock hit at 11:58 a.m., emanating from a seismic fault 6 miles beneath the floor of Sagami Bay, 30 miles south of Tokyo. A 60 by 60 mile segment of the Philippine oceanic plate ruptured and thrust itself against the Eurasian continental plate, releasing a massive burst of tectonic energy down the docks of Yokohama, Japan's biggest port and its gateway to the West. Hundreds of well-wishers were seeing off the Empress of Australia, a 615-foot luxury steamship bound for Vancouver. The smiles vanished, remembered Ellis M. Zacharias, then a young U.S. Navy officer who was standing on the pier when the earthquake hit. And for an appreciable instant, everybody stood transfixed by the sound of unearthly thunder. Moments later, a tremendous jolt knocked Zacharias off his feet and the pier collapsed, spilling cars and people into the water.
Wow. So
the date was September 1st, 1923, and the event was the Great Kanto earthquake. And remember, he was on his way to the docks.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Remember, he went back and grabbed the wife and the son and all their luggage there. And then, but then that's when, they couldn't take the cart.
Right. Because the roads were ruined.
Yeah. So they were on their way there. Let's see. The event was a great Kanto earthquake, at the time considered the worst natural disaster ever to strike quake-prone Japan. The initial jolt was followed a few minutes later by a 40-foot high tsunami. A series of towering waves swept away thousands of people. Then came fires roaring through the wooden houses of Yokohama and Tokyo, the capital, burning everything and everyone in their path. The death toll would be about 140,000, including 44,000 who had sought refuge near Tokyo's Sumida River in the first few hours, only to be immolated by a freak pillar of fire known as a dragon twist. The temblor destroyed 2 of Japan's largest cities and traumatized the nation. It also whipped up nationalist and racist passions. And the quake may have emboldened right-wing forces at the very moment that the country was poised between military expansion and an embrace of Western democracy, only 18 years before Japan would enter World War II. So let's see. So the 9-point earthquake that struck the northeast coast of Hansu this past March is not likely to have such an impact on Japan's history. Nevertheless, there are parallels. Like the 1923 quake, this one unleashed secondary disasters. A tsunami that washed away dozens of villages, mudslides, fires, and damage to the Fukushima Daiichi reactors. So this is what happened a few years ago, right? We remember that one.
Right.
They talk about that earthquake. I think that was 2011 maybe. And then let's see. Before the Great Kanto earthquake struck, Japan was full of optimism. I thought this part was interesting to know. Japan was full of optimism. No center symbolized the country's dynamism. More than Yokohama, known as the City of Silk, founded as Japan's first foreign settlement. In 1859, 5 years after U.S. Commodore Matthew Perry forced the shogun to open Japan to the West, Yokohama had grown into a cosmopolitan city of 500,000, attracting entrepreneurs, fugitives, traders, spies, and drifters from every corner of the world. The post rose like a mirage in the desert, wrote one Japanese novelist. From the waterfront promenade, known as the Bund, to the Bluff, the hillside neighborhood favored by foreign residents. Yokohama was where East met West, and liberal ideas, which kind of we saw when he was working for that family, right? Including democracy, collective bargaining, and women's rights, transfixed those who engaged them. Nobel nominee, I'm gonna mess up this name, Junicho Cho Tani
Oh, you
Saki,
got it.
who spent 2 years in Yokohama writing screenplays, marveled at a riot of loud Western colors and smells, the odor of cigars, the aroma of chocolate, the fragrance of flowers, the scent of perfume. The great Kanto earthquake liberated all of that in a single afternoon. According to survivors, the initial quaking lasted for about 14 seconds, long enough to bring down nearly every building on Yokohama's watery, unstable ground. The three-story Grand Hotel, an elegant Victorian villa on the seafront that had played host to Rudy Yard Kipling, W. Somerset Maugham, which I've read one of his books, it's so good, and William Howard Taft, collapsed, crushing hundreds of guests and employees. 20 expatriate regulars at the Yokohama United Club, the city's most popular watering hole, died when the concrete building pancaked. Otis Manchester Poole, a 43-year-old American manager of a trading firm, stepped out of his largely still intact office near the Bund to face an indelible scene. Over everything had settled a thick white dust. And we saw that in the show, in the movie too.
Right.
He remembered years later, and through the yellow fog of dust still in the air, a copper-colored sun shone upon the silent havoc in sickly reality, fanned by high winds, fires from overturned cook stops and ruptured gas mains spread. Soon the entire city was ablaze. And there's more. I mean, you can go on if you really want to know the impact
Right.
of that.
I mean, all I keep on thinking of is like the Great Fire in like San Francisco. I can't remember. I don't do well with years, so forgive me, folks. I remember events, but I don't remember years very well. But you know, it's like all the wooden buildings all right next to each other, one blade, whoo, and you can wipe out whole spaces and everything like that. Which
that's what happened.
There's numerous fires that happen in like New York and you know all those spaces.
So sad.
And everything, and just how fragile that the beginning of all of this really was, you know.
So what happens right at the end, Hansu meets up with the Yakuza.
Yes.
And they kind of make their way. They make their way to the Yakuza's family, and Hansu follows him. But on the way, he sees his family, the American family, dead.
Yeah.
And he gets the pocket watch.
That's where he gets
the pocket watch. We all thought he bought it. Like, ooh, he went on some fabulous trip, bought it for her. So but it meant something.
Yes. So this means something way more than what we thought. You know, it's like this is not just some fancy schmancy little pocket watch.
That was
he was giving his heart to her.
That was his almost like that was going to be his ticket to America. Or I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like that
it symbolized way more than what initially we were led to believe. Yeah, for sure.
What he could have been.
Yeah.
And so
for her to sell it and he kept track of, I mean, right, it's kind of like, ooh, wow, that actually meant a lot more to her, to him than we were led to believe.
Okay, so we see the whole scene that they put in with they burned that barn down with the 4 Koreans in it, because we read a little bit about that in this article.
It fanned the flames of nationalism and racism.
Yeah.
And they use the word racism there, and that's what I was saying. It's like it's racism because they considered themselves biologically distinct groups.
So then we see then the Yakuza, he hides Hansu.
Yeah.
In the wagon, and when they get to his family, he finds his family, and he tells Hansu, you still have a father's debt to pay.
Right.
and he kind of, I guess he takes him under his wing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, from
And
there,
that was it.
yeah, from there, that's it. And to say this, that again, the subtleties of like racial distinctions in this space, because we're being in the United States, it's like we do a very bad job of not being able to distinguish between different ethnicities, right? Like how we were just talking about the Mexican and other Central and South American folks. We do equally bad of a job of distinguishing between different Asian ethnicities. And so what could be missed, what surely would be missed by most folks, is that the clothing style was different between the ethnicities also. That if in those spaces, because you could be led to wonder, it's like, well, why didn't Hansu just act like he was Japanese and just roll out of there? It's because of how he was dressed. He was dressed in a way that would only be someone Korean. And so they wouldn't have even batted an eyelash, and they would have killed him right along with those other 4 prisoners or whatever. But it's like, it's like, so it's not physical distinction. That's what I'm trying to say, right? It's like, we're like, oh, but they look so much the same. Well, it's like, well, when you do look the same, they're going to dress you different, because that has been universally like one of the things that people will establish when it comes to, like I said, these racial distinctions. Like, well, you know what, we actually look like each other, so we're going to make sure that y'all don't dress the way that we do, so that we can distinguish you from us when we want to do the dirty work of racism and stuff like that. And so anyway, so just in case you missed that, which, like I said, most people would have, is that he was dressed in a way, he wasn't just dressed like a poor person, he was dressed in a way that would have signified to Japanese folks that he's Korean. Killed, and in that space, he would have got smoked.
Yeah, you get a little more of that too in the book, which is really,
Oh, that the dress, like you're talking more about the racism happening.
Well, more that you can pass. I don't want to give too much away, but you can pass for Japanese if it's.
Yeah, there's a whole last thing about passing.
Yeah.
It's like you could pass if you dress different. That's why they were so strict. You would get killed. They
can't have, your accent your Japanese has to be really good.
Yeah, exactly.
But and then they have to change his name, change names and things like that. But that's addressed in the book more.
Yeah, no,
passing for
and if you're Korean, and if you're in this space, I don't know how severe it was. I'm fairly confident it was the same, because it's all across the world in regards to like racial, like in creating racial groups, is that if you're part of the inferior racial group and you're caught trying to pass, they'll kill you flat out, murder. It's a death sentence. It's not, you know what I'm saying? Like, because they it's like, no, we're not, we're not going to do this, because it is easy for them to pass, relatively easy for them to pass. And so it's a big thing. And so that happened in the United States also, passing without, like, that's a very big narrative in African-American culture, that once you get down to a certain space and you get mixed with enough white, if you would, there's some folks who actively passed. But that, for here in the United States, it has, I'm going to say it bluntly, it does have a lot to do with looks, if you would. It's harder to pass. It's like, I wouldn't be able to pass. But if you were light enough, you surely could.
Gosh, it reminds me of the movie. One
of your favorite movies.
Yeah.
I forgot
Imitation of Life.
Imitation of Life. Yep.
Where
she actively passed.
She passed, but once they found out that she was, it was a boyfriend, and he beat her up, and So that was episode 7. We got one more left. And then we'll see what we're doing next.
Indeed.
Okay, thanks for watching, and thanks for listening. This is Talk K Dramas with Bruce and Dallas. Bye.
Bye.